My grandfather had a few rules. One of them is always know where the exit is. That can be physically. I think you can use that as a metaphor for your job or an investment. And so I tend to always think about that from a safety perspective.
If you're within 3 feet of me, we're probably talking about real estate, much to my family's chagrin. But here's the thing. Most people see 7% rates and freeze. I see opportunity. They're waiting for the perfect deal, and well, I've analyzed thousands of them, and perfect just doesn't exist. So I talk to operators across every asset class, flippers, multifamily syndicators, note investors, and whatever else is working. No sales pitches allowed, just real lessons from people actually doing it. I'm Ed Matthews, and this is Real Estate Underground. Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. It is Ed Matthews again with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Today we have Dr. Jordan Romano from a place that I absolutely love, Boston and the Boston area. And he is a real estate investor. But the interesting thing about his approach is, first, the thing that jumped out at me is how he finds deals, which I'm fascinated by. We're going to talk a lot about that. And there's a whole bunch of other things we're going to be talking about, but that's where we're going to start. Jordan, welcome to the show, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, truly. One of the things that I'm always interested in is how people got into the business. So why don't we start with who you are, what you do, and how you got into this industry?
Sure. My name's Jordan Romano. I was born in the suburbs of Jersey and grew up outside of Philly. I'm a physician. I've lived in the Boston area now for about 15 years. I trained in New Hampshire. How did I get into real estate? My mother was in real estate. I had just finished, actually, my first real estate deal was terrible, timing-wise. I bought a house. I didn't want to rent during my residency, my medical residency. I was on a rural rotation, and my mother traveled up to New Hampshire. She was in real estate and was sending me pictures. This is before smartphones. She was sending me pictures, and they would have to load on your camera. You probably remember those days.
Good thing.
And one by one, the pictures were coming through, and I bought a single family home. I bought in 2000. It was 2006, right? I bought like literally at the peak, and then I sold it, and I had to bring money to the table and sold like right as things were in 2011, end of 2011.
Yeah.
So that was bad timing. But how did I get into real estate thereafter? I had come down to Boston after being in New Hampshire for 5 years. So I came down here in 2011, 2012. I think around that time, it was our current president's first term, and he was in real estate, and my mother had been in real estate. And it was like one thesis of investing is invest in what you know. And that was always around me. When I'd come home, the story I like to tell is, I don't know if they still do them. Do they still do broker opens for residential?
I'm sure they do. I don't attend them, but.
So so back in, this is call it 2000, when I was in college, I'd come home, and to spend time with my mom, she'd go and be doing brokers opens, and I'd go with her, and I loved it because it was like free food and the spreads were usually good. And she would always let me pick like one McMansion or like giant farm property. She wasn't into selling those. We'd go see the little condos, and then we would go see a couple like aspirational properties. So I would say that was my first taste into real estate. And so then once I started having some money, this is call it 2012, 2013, the thesis that I like is invest in what you know, and real estate was around me. And I said, you know what? I know, and my mother had retired up to where I did my training. And so I said, maybe I'm going to invest in some real estate up here.
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned about you getting ready for this conversation is you tend to be hyperlocal with your investments. You're not along this.
Stan Druckenmiller says, put all your eggs in one basket, just watch the basket really well, something along those lines. I don't immediately stick all my eggs in one basket. I don't think he does either. I think would be a quick take on what he was saying. Basically, you do put out some feelers, and once your thesis is proven out, what's the saying? It's about how much you've bet when you were right and how much you've bet when you were wrong. Not really about being right and wrong. It's how right are you when you're right and how wrong are you when you're wrong. And I've had a good thesis. You can't invest in hindsight, but my thesis has played out nicely. And obviously, I think a lot of your listeners and investors in real estate are realizing what made sense even a few years ago maybe is not making sense moving forward.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And you and I tend to follow a similar investment thesis in that I I invest almost exclusively, especially when I'm the operator, in Middlesex County, Connecticut, basically. So I'm half an hour north, half an hour south, half an hour east west. And that's a target rich environment for me. It's a more rural market than you probably work in, but similar idea in that I want to be able to lay hands on a property if I need to. And the other part of it that really helps is I know all the brokers, I know all the contractors. They're friends. They're not acquaintances. And you learn living in, whether that's professionally or actually living in your market, you learn a whole lot about the dynamics of what's going on. I know what the inventory is in Middlesex County. It's something I grab at least once a week from one of the realtors in the area, and I'm able to track it. And that helps me make decisions in terms of where we're going to deploy capital.
Yeah, here's a perfect example. I was just chatting with somebody about listing some land for me. And she said, "Oh, I can't show it on Saturday. And how about Monday morning? Oh, wait, I'm showing the Big Cat Cafe." And I was just like, "That's for sale?" And she was like, "I'll see you at 11 o'clock." And I'm like, "Oh," so she didn't mean to, it's an off market showing, but that's not what it's called. I changed the name on purpose. But by being hyper local and by knowing those folks and just I like going. I go with my mom. I go to the local diner. There's a couple of them. One is by the college town, and then there's another couple diners that I like to go that are. But being in those greasy spoons, you bump into people, and you're like, "How's it going? What business is going on? Oh, I'm doing this big job here." And maybe I think the other thing to keep in mind too is a lot of people think in too small of time frames. You can look on Zillow right now and see what's on the market. But to your point, if you are talking to these folks, the likelihood that over 20 years it could lead to some business, it's not the only reason to do it. It's for the love of the game, if you will. But you'll bump into somebody and something will click, right? You'll have some detailed information that may inform you on whether or not you should sell or buy or how you're going to shift your investments.
Yep. So in the introduction of this show, which you'll hear after we record, is that if you're within 3 feet of me, we're probably talking about real estate at some point during the conversation. I drive my wife and girls crazy with it. I'll be standing in line at the grocery store and, "Hey, how's it going, Ed? Hey, pretty good. I was looking at this property the other day," and pretty soon it's, "Oh, my aunt's selling or my uncle's selling or this or that." And I can't tell you how many deals I've found that way. You have an interesting way of finding deals yourself, talking about the zoning. Why don't you walk us through that strategy in terms of how you create deal flow?
Some of it I would say is the word I would use is just curiosity. And that curiosity, what does that actually mean? It means most people should realize, and this is the benefit of being hyperlocal, is that there are planning and zoning boards, and that a lot of jurisdictions around the country, they're not even the ones that you would think are not that terribly sophisticated, have a lot of data and information. And I'm not even talking Zillow. I'm talking like
meeting notes, minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Meeting notes and minutes, and you can listen to them, and you can see where the puck is moving. You can see, oh, they approved this big storage unit. Wait a minute. One of the biggest developers, this is something I'm picking up on, and it's by even saying it out loud. I'm refreshing a thought right now just by saying this. One of the biggest developers in the area, who I know owns a couple hundred units, just went back to the planning board to expand his storage space. Now, he could be wrong, right? But this is a guy who, through his family, through multiple generations, has been building and expanding his portfolio in the area. And he is doubling down because he wants to expand his storage business space. Now, maybe he's doing that because he wants to flip it, and it needs to be a certain size to attract outside money. There are all kinds of, but to me, it's signal, right? It's like, why is he doing that? Oh, that's very interesting. The one deal that I have done recently, and I just talked about listing some land. I'm going up again this weekend for the holiday weekend. I'll be driving around the town. I had passed this, it was listed on this property I purchased, was listed on Zillow for, I don't know, 6 months or so. And I happened to be driving in the car with my mother, and I happened to say, "Oh, that's a lot of land." And I just paused, and I was like, that's a lot of land. And I knew where I was in the town. There's a big hospital, and then there's a smaller hospital. And this is like a block away from the smaller hospital. So nice location, public water and sewer. It's 0.9 of an acre, and the house sat to one end of the lot line. And I happened to look to my mom, and I said, "Could we subdivide that? Do you think the town would allow it?" And I'm like, what price would I have to buy the house where I could flip the house back onto the market if I needed to and not lose a lot of money to play out this thesis? Sure enough, I go to the planning board and I get it surveyed. I'm whatever, 10 grand. I have it surveyed. I go to the planning board and this is a local surveyor who comes with you. They do a great job and they approved it. The town wants small lots for what they call workforce housing, where people can put a $400,000-$500,000 home, which is a starter home, maybe with an ADU, maybe not. And now I have 3 lots. One has the existing home and 2 vacant lots that are buildable on town water and sewer. And I don't know who to attribute this to, but it's, you don't find a deal, you make a deal. So
Yeah.
there are deals, right, that on Zillow where you're like, it just makes sense. And I like the game. I probably like you. I like the arbitrage, and I like seeing what other people don't see. And I like almost like I watch my little boys building and watching, that, and the little boy in me of building something and creating something. And I'm helping the town, and I created something that wasn't there before. And so it would have been and still is a perfectly fine single family home. But now we can put a couple more homes there. They're not entirely cramped. It's a third of an acre. And now a nurse that works at the hospital is going to be able to build a home. And I have a retired couple that's interested, that wanted to build their own home, that can now do that. So
Yeah. And
I would say it's, going back to your original question, it's curiosity. And I stare at the same town map. And by the way, you're going to miss deals. You're going to miss deals in the neighboring towns. There's all kinds of things. You're like, oh, that would have been interesting. And I miss things. But that builder who owns 200 units has now come to me to buy those he also is interested in those 2 pieces of land. He lives a couple blocks away. He drove by this thing daily. And so that's what I would say is also, don't underestimate just because somebody else hasn't done it. One of the loops in my brain is, what am I missing? But am I wrong? Right? Because this big time builder drove past this 700 times a year, going to work and coming back, maybe more, call it 1,000 times. And he didn't think to buy it. So what? And I realized the real risk is, okay, if they don't approve the subdivision. And so I sharpened my pencil and I'm like, I think this will work. And sure enough, now this guy is going to buy from me something that's, how do you think he feels? It's 2 blocks away from where he lives.
Yeah, no, the relationships are a fundamental piece to success, right? But the other part of it is that you've got to be able to look at properties. We bought something similar. So funny story. I think the listeners have heard me tell this story 37 times, but I'll tell you anyway, is that we bought a 58-acre farm locally here in Haddam, where I live. And the initial conversation was about the 1,300 square foot house. And he called me back, and we agreed on the house and the 5 acres around it. He called me back like 20 minutes later. He said, what do you want to do about the land? What land? And get in my car and drive back. I'm like, there's 58 acres back here. And we worked it out, and he got a fair shake and I got a good deal, and he didn't have to pay a tax bill he didn't want to pay anymore. And I'm ultimately going to end up building 7 to 10 houses back there. So same deal.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A motivated seller just filled out your web form. If you call back within 5 minutes, you're nearly 4 times more likely to get that seller appointment. But delay your follow-up by even just 10 minutes? Forget it. You're toast. Ella Vista Connect calls that lead back in 60 seconds, qualifies them, and schedules your meeting. Find out how much slow follow-up is costing you. Free calculator at ellavista.com/underground.
Yeah, I like those sort of deals. I like the idea of, at least in New England, in this small town, there's a cyclical nature. I think, again, the big piece that I suspect people do this, but they don't pay attention to their curiosity. It's when I really scrutinize photos when I'm looking in Zillow. They're like, okay, kitchen, this and that. And you're like, there's no dishes in the cabinets. Nobody's home. Somebody's carrying this tax bill, and it's coming to winter. And do you know what oil? Oh, it's an oil. They heat by oil, and you can't have the pipes freeze. And they just did a price reduction. If this is still on the market in the fall, I can come with cash and really get a good deal on this.
Sure.
And that's what happened with that single family home that I subdivided. It was a end of the fall. Do you really want to carry this to the busy spring season? it's six of one, half a dozen of another. You might get $20,000 more dollars, but with heating costs and taxes and waiting time, and it's a maybe in the spring, it's not a guaranteed. Or do
Couple
you want to
thousand a
take
month.
what's that?
It's a couple thousand a month.
That's right. For the chance to maybe get the price that maybe you'll get, maybe, right? And or you can just take my deal now, and they said bird in the hand, and that's how you make deals like that. And it's a win for everybody.
Yeah. So you talk about curiosity, and one of the things that my team had kind of pointed out was relentless curiosity. And that's a couple more levels above, right? And so you're a busy physician. I know you do other things as well. And so when do you spend the time? You mentioned you also have a family. So when do you spend the time? Do you require sleep, or how are you generating deals on a consistent basis?
I think some of it is you rotate crops, right? To your point, it's if you have ongoing relationships, then that's something that comes due every now and again. I think that I look at the maps. It's on my bookmarks. If you load up my computer right now, it's one of the tabs that automatically opens up. So I would say it's moments. Am I getting beaten by people who do this day in and day out? Certainly. But look, I still found that deal where the guy working on the bigger deals missed this little deal and now wants the land to keep his builders busy. I would say the medical term is in the interstitium. It's like in the in-between. It's in the in-between. It's half an hour a day before I go to bed, or it's not terribly regimented. And then I have weekends. I think at the end of the day, I've made a concerted effort that it is a large part of my investment portfolio. And it's also a large part of my sort of mission, because it is fixing up a town. It is investing in this town, specifically where I trained for medicine. And that is a little bit of my mission. I feel like I'm giving back. And I truly believe that everybody wins. Like when I do that subdivision, there's more tax that the town gets because somebody's going to build a home, but then somebody gets a home, and then I've made some money as well. And then the builders and plumbers, and it's just the ripple effects of encouraging investment. Capitalism has become a dirty word, but to me, that is just a virtuous type of capitalism where these small towns can truly benefit. And I think that somebody's gonna mow the lawn, right?
I can't tell you.
Spend money more people are going to be living in the town to spend money at the grocery stores and at the restaurants and at the coffee shops. And it's just, I'm not saying that's all me. There's a team that has helped facilitate that. And I think that's when you have a deal not go through, like I just did, that's hard to deal with because you have a vision and not everyone is always going to understand. Yeah. Exactly.
One of the things, it's interesting you frame it like that, because one of the things that I tend to do when we acquire, particularly with the single family properties, is I go door to door. I go across the street. I go next door neighbor to the right, next door neighbor to the left, introduce myself, give them my contact information. A, if we're ever making noise at too early or too late, I want to know about it. But also B, I want them to know that we're going to be good stewards of that property, and we're going to clean it up. We're going to fix it up. We're going to sell it to a nice family, which is going to not only remove any potential blight that is happening around that property, but it's also going to raise the values of their properties as well. Everybody wins when you do these kind of deals.
Yeah, I'm a fan of you need to be reminded more than you need to be taught. And so coming on this podcast and hearing that was a tough lesson that I had to be reminded of. I had a lot of things go well. I'm coming off of a strikeout that was painful, where a lot of neighbors rallied against one of my projects. And I've gotten away from the door. I have a lot of relationships locally. I got away from the door knocking in anticipation of presenting to the zoning board before this deal. And what you just said to me is when I go up this weekend, it is going to be hat in hand, and it's going to be speaking to a lot of these neighbors about that project and almost apologizing that I couldn't convey that I didn't come approach them beforehand it was a deal that I needed a zoning variance because the box was too big for the piece of land that it sat on for it to qualify for 4 units. So I needed a variance from the town to say, yes, the box was huge. It's the largest 2-family in the downtown area. It's meant to be 4 units. It should be 4 units. And a neighbor, this is his right. I understand why he felt the way he felt, but he pitched an effort to bring a lot of people to the meeting. And I think the zoning board, as being as objective as they could, it is hard to ignore literally the full room that they
Vox
said
Populi.
has not been that full in, I think they said a couple of years, just to oppose my deal. And so what you just said to me is a great reminder to put on my to-do list, is that when I'm up there this weekend is to go chat again with all the neighbors, and it is not for self-serving, it's more to be in service of the town. And from my perspective, it's to apologize that I didn't bring them into sort of even the planning of why I think the 4 units would actually benefit all of them, and it's not going to be a drawback. So that's sharing a little sort of vulnerable moment where I don't always win. Like,
of course not.
But it's also helpful because you never know what you're going to come across. It's funny, for all the people who got up to speak against my project, I stayed after this chat with all of them. I said, I'm going to stay here. I was there till 11 p.m. And one of the people, she came up to me and she goes, "Oh, you should buy the one next to that. The people who run that one are terrible, and we have so many problems with them." And I'm like, here you were saying I'm this evil person, and yet now you want me to be a partner to help fix up the neighborhood. So I guess it cuts both ways.
It does.
But thank you for that reminder, because that is,
Sure.
I think that's an important piece that not a lot of people do. And it's because it's hard to do, to knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, I'm that evil investor, developer that has I'm not nameless or faceless. Here I am."
Yeah, and I think the key phrase that you used before is really important, and that is to be in service, right? Be of service. And I think in a lot of cases where there's disputes like the one you're describing, and I've been in my fair share of those as well, is that in a lot of cases, those folks just want to be heard, right? They want to be heard. And in many cases, a solution can be found, not necessarily on the debate floor of a planning and zoning meeting, but over a cup of coffee or a beer. Usually you can figure that out, right? Not usually. A lot of times you can figure that out. And sometimes you can't, and so be it. And then you go to plan B and plan C and plan D until you find something that you can make work. But the interesting thing that I find is that, like I said earlier, I think in a lot of cases, folks just want to be heard.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would say is, for being hyperlocal and doing my deals and sourcing that way, when I went to the zoning board, and some of that is, how do I do it all? Obviously, I missed some things, right? As being a physician and being busy, I had been working a few different types of deals. I guess this is my excuse, and it didn't make my list. It just didn't make my list of I didn't, on my, what's this saying, on my bingo card of things that would come up, it would be that a neighbor would rally 20 other single family owners in the surrounding blocks to come. So I didn't think I would need to have a counterforce of people to speak in my favor. Could I have done that? Yeah, of course. I know all those other builders and things like that who would have come. In fact, the head of the zoning board is one of those folks who owns a lot of units, and he almost convinced the board, not because he's trying to help me out, but because he understands what I'm doing.
The rising tide floats all boats, right?
And yeah, exactly. And he understands what the city wants. And I think I could have fought the decision. I think ultimately I decided to back out of the deal. That has had some reverberations. I think there's some folks it's a small town. They're not used to seeing deals break up. And I think that's been something I'm probably going to have to deal with for some time, but that's part of doing business.
That's part of it. Yeah. One of the things that let's move on to the final 5. So one of the things I'm always fascinated by, and someone like you have a successful medical career, you have other things that you do that are quite successful. You are a renowned expert, and you are investing in real estate above and beyond. The basic things are taken care of, right? You're not really sweating paying the mortgage. Car payments are handled. Saving for tuition's probably in pretty good shape. And nevertheless, you get up and go to work on Monday morning. And to me, I've learned over the years that is purpose, right? That it's something above earning, right? It's well above that. And I'm curious what your purpose is. What gets you out of bed on Monday morning?
I think by my nature, I'm a curious person. I like finding and seeing things that maybe other people don't. And I like that, and that translates into a lot of different arenas. You alluded to the fact I do some medical expert witness work, and so I've really enjoyed operating in that space as well. And same with the real estate. I like having an impact, and I think that I can only speak to like sort of my lived experience. What I can say is a lot of people maybe feel disenfranchised. I don't watch too much of the news, enough to be, I think, informed. But I think that's the cool thing about being hyper local is you can have an impact on a small town. I don't take outside money. I don't even take family money. This is me just investing my own money. Now, I have family members that say I should have taken a lot of money. I would have owned many hundreds of units and that sort of thing. But you
Maybe
can
someday.
have an impact. You can have an impact in America. And America is made up of a lot of these small municipalities. It's been a decade. And I feel like I have an impact. People know me. I help build and support other people's businesses, the lawn care guys, the plumbers, the handymen, the college kids who want to paint in the summers. Like maybe you have fond memories of that when you were a kid. Like you can help support an economy and have a positive impact. And it has nothing to do with Washington. It has nothing to do with international affairs. And I think to me that's important. And there is a piece of giving back that I would say I have had a lot of extraordinary opportunities in my life. A lot of them I've found on my own, but I've been supported by a community. And to me, a lot of people say thank you and you move on. I don't think that's a wrong way of looking at things. I just have felt that this community where I did my medical training was such an important part of my life that supporting the individuals and the town and the housing where people who work at the hospital live has been my way of giving back.
Awesome. I'm curious about the mentors you've had along the way. And so I'm curious, what's the best advice you ever got and who gave it to you?
Ooh, I would say it depends. I would say just general life advice. My grandfather had a few rules. One of them is always know where the exit is. That can be physically. I think you can use that as a metaphor for your job or an investment. And so I tend to always think about that from a safety perspective. He had to leave the country that he grew up in and then came to the United States. And so knowing where the exit was and being able to, I can't imagine having somebody knock on your door and say you have to leave within 24 hours and then having to sell items and things of that nature to leave. But I think that's an important piece, is always knowing where the exit is, having flexibility and optionality. Living in the United States, I think we have a lot of that. Just geographically, there's a lot of flexibility that other people in other countries may not have that ability. I would say for real estate, I tend to favor Sam Zell. He had, I think he passed away this past year. He was a bit cantankerous, but I liked his advice. He wrote a book, Am I Being Too Subtle? I think you can just listen to him on the podcast if you don't want to read it, but I like that book. He would say, I remember in an interview, somebody was saying to him, like, what do you think of the market? And he's like, I don't care about the market. Show me the deal, because there are good deals in bad markets and bad deals in good markets. So I'm more interested in what deal you're doing, not necessarily. Now, is it harder to do deals depending on interest rates and where money is flowing and job markets? And yeah, of course, but you can still do good deals in air quotes, bad markets. I think those are the best.
Yeah, that was excellent advice. I'm gonna borrow your grandfather's advice for sure. Always know where the exit is. I'm gonna marry that with my grandfather's advice, which was always present a moving target. In terms of looking back, and I think you've been very vulnerable, and I appreciate it, in terms of what's worked and what hasn't over the years. When you look back on your professional career, let's talk specifically about investing, right? What's a decision that you look back on and think, oh man, I would love to have that one back? And how did you manage your way through it?
When we're done, I'll probably think of another one, but off the top of my head, a rising tide floats all boats. So I didn't think that the economy would continue to go the way it's going. I've had, because of my hyperlocal kind of off-market strategy and conversations, I could have realistically probably a couple hundred units at this point, pretty close to it. I passed on a big deal that would have gotten me a bulk of that. A family that they were going to sell me their entire portfolio. It was, at the time, I did not have a property manager. And I'm not drawing judgments of the tenants or anything along those lines, but it was like C- class. It was really rough product. Tenants I probably would not have wanted to deal with myself. And I didn't do the deal because I wasn't thinking large enough. And in hindsight, it would have been very capital intensive to buy it. to bring it up to B, because my whole thesis is I like to be in B, because in good times C is moving to B, in bad times A is moving to B. Make B product, stay in B product, charge B product rents, and you'll always do fine. And that has served me very well. You miss out some of the upside, but on the downside, you're covered.
And over the long term,
that deal, I passed on it. And one of the other local guys, big guys, got wind of it, and it was gone. Like when I hesitated and I said, I'm not sure, it was gone. And these guys, they're fast. They write a check, it was done. So, and that was a pathway to 100 units. But you know what? I guess I'm old enough to know that there are levels to every game you play, but it's also, it can never get good enough. Like there's always more. And so I think the deals that haven't happened, here's another one that I've shared before, but I like this one as well. There's a big highway, and Dartmouth's hospital is off this highway. It's the confluence of two of the biggest roadways, probably in New Hampshire and Vermont. Off to the side, I noticed there was for sale some land, a janky puzzle piece of land right off the highway. And it was owned by 5 brothers. And I'm like, why hasn't this deal gotten done? This was over COVID. And it was a tear down house on 4 acres of the whole area was probably 10 acres. And they owned about 4 acres of it. But you couldn't get the 5 brothers to the table. And somebody was always holding out because he had more back taxes or a lien on his other house. And it was, and this is the problem with doing deals and not moving fast in a small town. I got them under contract. I had spoken to the guy who owned another 2 acres, who turns out he had a large commercial garage on this parcel as well, that he had a landscaping business. He was going to sell the landscaping business. I'm trying to figure that out. Then there was maybe 3 or 4 single family homes there. I could have put this together. It's currently listed. Just because you miss out on a deal doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's currently listed. I think it's down to $5 million. But I could have bought in most of the land and then bought off the single family homes one by one by overpaying for them and been in for, call it, I think my numbers were like 1.75 or call it $2 million. I didn't have the cash, but I could have figured it out. It was listed for 6.5. It's now come down. I think it's now listed for 4.5. But the person who came in, once I passed on, and I didn't go to closing on that single family home with the brothers, that's all it took. Because I brought in my contractor, and once he knew, he wanted to respect me, but once he knew I was not moving forward, it was gone. Yeah. The next person who came in and played out my thesis and leveled everything, and it's a perfect place for a small corporate park or something like that. And it is one of the busiest intersections in the state, in that mid part of New Hampshire. And I saw that. And so I think that's the thing, is you got to be able to let things go. I think that's the one lesson, is like, there's always another deal. I guess right. That is tomorrow's another day. There's always another deal, and just let it go. A lesson learned. It showed that my intuition's good. I'm good at seeing the future and seeing value in places. Yeah. Let it go.
It's a healthy thing because it'll make you crazy, right? So it parallel to learning to let things go like that. I also, for every property I've sold, I never drive by them ever again if I can avoid it. I don't want to know. I hope the folks that bought it do well and love the place and all that, but I go out of my way. There's one property that I have to drive because it's literally on the road between my home and my office. So I drive by it every day. And actually, I drove by it every day for about 10 years and thought, when that comes for sale, I'm buying it because I'm sick and tired of looking. It was a mess. And now it's beautiful. And the folks that live there are taking excellent care of it, and it's still beautiful, and I'm happy for them. But other than that, of all the other properties that I've bought and sold, multifamily, single family, whatever, I never, ever go back. So I'm curious about how you take in information. What's the book on your nightstand these days? Virtual or
going back to something I said before, you need to be reminded more than you need to be taught. I tend to read books. He actually, I think in this segment in the book, talks about how he reads books, which is skipping around. That's how I've always read books. I'm not a page 1 to page 250. It's the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. He's like a philosopher thinker with a tech binge, angle to him. I think that he has a lot of interesting ways of looking at life, and he's older than I am by, call it, 10 or 15 years. So I think that's helpful from a perspective. I'm just trying to think of what else. There's a book, I'm blanking on the name of it. It's by, I think her name is Annie Dukes. She was a female poker player.
Oh,
and
I know the book. I
a
haven't
couple
read it.
books. Yeah, she wrote a couple books. She did consulting, probably still does, for
Yeah, she still does.
like hedge funds and VC firms about taking risk. And so she wrote books. I think it's even called something like that. It's like Calculating Risk or something along those lines. It's a book with a red cover. That's in my stack. I tend to drive everybody who comes over to my house nuts because I'm that guy who has stacks of books. Does not
Thinking
take
in
much
Bets,
to,
by the way, is the book you're thinking of.
What's that?
Thinking in Bets. Yeah.
That's it. Yes. It's a good book. But I tend not to put all my money on one book. Speaking in Bets, I take a little bit, all it takes for me. And that's why I will consume lots of books very quickly and then revisit them. Because to me, it only takes one line or a couple lines. And I tend to, my books have the dog tagged, or dog-eared, or bookmarked. So when I revisit them, those lessons I come to very quickly. Because, again, I think it's important that sometimes when you revisit, I'm sure we're all human. I feel like this will resonate. Sometimes if you hear something when you're not ready, it doesn't mean as much. But if you read something at the right time, it's going to click, and you're like, oh, this, I get it. And so there are things in Sam Zell book that I will come back to about how he arbitraged X, Y, or Z. And it helps me to revisit those. Right now, actually on my nightstand is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. It's a white book. It's taken from podcasts and tweets and goes over, it's like tech philosophy, but it's something I enjoy.
And very applicable to our business as well. I've read it, and it's absolute genius. So, yeah, and in fact, I'm a notorious rereader of books. And it's similar how it's funny how our brains work similarly, because if you ever borrow a book from me, you're going to get it, and it's going to be highlighted and dog-eared and notes in the margin. I'm a very active reader. It's the only way I can make sure I retain the stuff that I want to learn from these books, because I look at a book as if some human being is boiling down 10, 12, 15 years of their life in 250 pages. And I'm going to try and suck the marrow out of that bone as best I can, right? It's because it's a rare opportunity to get that kind of view into somebody's brain. So I'm curious, the last question of the lightning round, and then we'll start to land the plane. How do you define success in your life?
I would say right now, it's optionality and flexibility. It's something that I had been, and I technically still am, but at not in a full-time capacity, worked in a kind of corporate, academic, medical environment for pretty much my whole career. And now I do that in not full-time. And that allows some flexibility and optionality. The world's a big place. And I think when you're nose down in a book or in your job, I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you become very good at something. I think the difficulty is there's a lot going on in the world that you're going to miss. And so I'm enjoying taking a step back from that and having the optionality to do what I want and work from where I want, when I want. I think that a lot of Americans are looking at the world that way, maybe you say post-COVID, but we're well beyond COVID now. But I think a lot of people still think that way. And so to me, success is waking up, doing what I want, when I want, with who I want, very soon after I think of doing it. Meaning there isn't a big time delay, and I don't have to say, oh, I have to delay doing that I can't do that for 6 or 8 or 10 months. And listen, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to do that. And I'm just trying to use my success to bring others under the tent and help other people if they define success that way. Because to a lot of people, they wouldn't even see that. They'd find that some of what I do may be too risky and not enjoyable. But to me, I have honed a skill that I feel like it's hard for me to lose. And it certainly doesn't benefit me to think that I could lose. So I tend to think about, a younger me wouldn't have thought in such an optimistic way, but I tend to be very optimistic in how I approach what I'm doing. And I'm just like, if I present whatever it is that is a win, and as much people win as possible, that's a great way to have a day.
Awesome. Yeah, I try to do the same thing, right? Is I'm looking at the world and realizing that it's there are certainly opportunities out there. And anyway, so when you're not talking about real estate, what do you like to do?
That's a good question. It's interesting. Like you, when I'm doing something else, it
Talking
probably
about real
comes
estate.
up. It probably
That's me.
comes up as well, because I think it's interesting that it's something I want to share with, I do share with buddies of mine who weren't involved in it, and now they are. And I have a buddy, maybe he'll listen to this too, but every time we speak, he's like, "You don't understand. Thank you." He was paying a ton in tax, and now I think faith is a big part of his life. And I think that giving back to his community in a similar way that I am with where I trained, I think that he's really enjoying that and has brought it into his family as well as, and so I think that he enjoys that. So I would say, what am I doing? I don't know. I think I'm going to the places. I'm spending, realistically right now, my parents are older. I'm spending time with my parents, with where they are. That my parents are divorced, but between Long Island and up in New Hampshire, I spend a decent amount of my off time, and it's just enjoying time, because it's easy to forget that what we're doing is, we're all headed to the same place. I don't mean to be terribly morbid, but it's easy to, we're playing going to the poker thing with Andy Dukes. It's like all our chips are going back in the middle eventually. Okay, fine. Maybe you can play some games and the chips get divided a little differently, but to me, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And a lot of what I'm doing is just spending time with family, knowing that some people probably have less time around physically with us that we may like, but that's part of the game that we're playing.
Yeah, between Brian Johnson and Kara Swisher, I think those are the only two folks that have figured out immortality. The rest of us, we're gonna, what's the term, shuffle off our immortal coil at some point.
Somebody was like, the jokes about Brian Johnson are like, what if he does all this and he gets hit by a bus? I don't know. If you enjoy it and it makes you enjoy life more, I think there's also, I'm sure there's some pithy saying, it'll pop up on my phone on Instagram, I'm sure, when we're done, about like getting the most out of life. It's not the longevity. It's like how much you're meaning and you're getting out of each day, rather than how many years you're living. I think that's another conversation. I think when you hit those levels of wealth, that's the one thing you want, that I see a lot of people chasing. And just from this isn't a medical opinion, but a lot of, sometimes when you're that far out on the curve of healthcare advances, you're in N of 1, and it's probably not having the impact that, I don't doubt that it might tweak some numbers and you might feel better, but the likelihood, I don't think it's as simple as everybody makes it out to be. We're programmed to die. It is hard to rewire that program. I'm sure there are people working on it. Yeah.
Not in our lifetime, my friend. But we'll see. You never know. Somebody will figure out how to manage, what do they call, telomeres or whatever, and it'll.
That's a big part of it. That's a big part.
We'll see. You'd know better than I. I was an English major. The thing
is, we have a wick, and the wick is burning, and when the wick burns down, the candle goes out.
It's interesting. You made me think of my grandfather, who was a World War II era Marine, and he would swim a mile or two every day, religiously. And he was also a really funny guy and had a very good self-deprecating sense of humor. And one year I bought him a T-shirt. I had a T-shirt made for him that said, on the front it said, "Eat right, exercise daily," and on the back it said, "Die anyway." And he wore that proudly for years until he stopped swimming, and lived 20 years after I gave him that T-shirt.
Yeah, they were built different. My grandfather, it sounds almost identical. He swam, that was his thing. He swam 2 miles every day at the community center, and he was a World War II era guy. He was in the second front in North Africa. Yeah, and just lived well into his 90s, smoked a pipe, just lived a harder life, but he really lived his life. And it was, I'm glad for you that you had what sounds like a similar role model in your life. When they say they don't make them like they used to, I think that is definitely true.
100% true. So Jordan, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you again for joining us today. So if people want to get to know you or learn more about your business, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I'm a physician, but on the side, I do medical expert witness work. The entity that I interact with and engage with folks through is medicalexpertwitness.com. If you just want to chat about other stuff too, it's a good way to get access to my calendar. If you go to medicalexpertwitness.com, there's a part that says, I think it's book time with Jordan. Although my assistants say I should probably not do that so much because my free time does get booked up. But I meet people all over the country. I love chatting with folks. Feel free to reach out. It's part of life is meeting new people.
Yeah, right on. Jordan Romano, thank you so much for joining us today. Continued good fortune. And hopefully, since we're basically neighbors, I hope we get to meet each other in person someday soon.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
This has been The Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.